Today, I'm really thrilled to have a guest on who is the embodiment to me of trusting your gut and following your instincts in a way that is realistic and based in grounded decision making. So, Holly Norian, she is a branding guide, a graphic designer, a print expert, a self-professed cat person turned dog mom, and into wellness and personal development and all sorts of things that, are sort of hot and trendy right now. What she also is an explorer. So for a long time professionally, she worked in the visual communications industry. And then in about 2017, decided to dive into entrepreneurship as Fancy Fox Design, the lead of Fancy Fox Design. And in 2021, and she'll explain this better than I can, but Holly started getting that restless itch that meant she was looking for her next big change, as if entrepreneurship wasn't enough, right? Though she'd never even stepped foot inside an RV, she threw out the idea to her husband that they would move out of their house and travel around the country. So a year and a half of research and preparations later, Holly took her business and her life on the road, complete with her husband, complete with her 2 dogs. Her goal was a totally different lifestyle. And to her surprise, the lessons she's learned on the road can be applied to life, to business, regardless of what your home looks like. So I'm excited today because I often wonder when I see stories like Holly's, how do people make these decisions? How do you know the difference between that itch of, I'm not thrilled with how everything's going in my life, where I feel like I need a change or I feel like I need something different? How do you know to trust that? But instead of sort of making an impetuous and quick and maybe not well thought out decision, following that gut, or ignoring that because you're afraid that's the only option is this impetuous and quick decision. I wonder, how do you trust your gut, even if the ideas that it's providing you sometimes seem impossible or out there or too wild to even imagine? I'm excited to talk to Holly today to find out exactly that. Welcome, Holly. I'm excited today to talk about part of, to talk about where you are in the world right now and how you got there, because I think, in knowing a little bit of your story, what intrigues me is not only, how do people make these big life-changing decisions, but also how do you know which ones to make and which ones to ignore? And so why don't you start just telling everybody sort of what I'm talking about? What is the big life-changing decision? And We'll start with there.
Well, I'll put it this way. My most recent life-changing decision, because there's been more than one.
Yeah. Great. Good. We're going to get into it.
But my most recent is moving out of our house. So it's me and my husband and our 2 adorable dogs, and we moved out of our house and live on the road full time in our truck and travel trailer. So right now I'm coming to you from the Grand Tetons, Jackson Hole area.
Okay.
And next week I'll be someplace else.
Yeah.
And living this nomad lifestyle and balancing work and adventure and downtime and all parts of life on the road.
Perfect. And I love when I first asked Holly, for those of you listening, to talk about this, she was like, I'd love to. I don't really want to talk about life on the road, though. And I was like, great, because neither do I. I want to talk about how you got there, because there's plenty of Instagram handles you can go follow for people who are doing life on the road. And that's great. But what really had me wondering and what I was intrigued by was, how do you get, well, let me back up a little bit. And I'm not telling tales on you, but, a lot of those Instagram channels are like 22-year-olds who rehab a bus and they hit the road with their single friends and whatever else. So I was really intrigued by the fact that here's this woman who has an established career, who's in a marriage, who has dogs, they have a home, like all of the things that we think we're supposed to want and be part of. And how do you not only decide, or really, how do you get to, I want to do this big, giant change in my life? So let's start there. How did you even get to? Because you said this is not the first time. So talk a little bit about that.
I'm not sure where in the journey I realized that looking back over my late teens and my 20s, I'd made pretty significant life changes about every 4 years. In the past, that looked like breaking off an engagement, realizing that wasn't the life path that I wanted to go down anymore. Breaking up with a boyfriend and getting my own apartment, my own space for the first time. And then finding my true life partner and getting married. And then, okay, we've been together for 4 years now, and now I'm starting to kind of get that restless itch again. But this time I definitely don't want to leave this relationship, which has kind of been the pattern thus far.
Sure. That's,
so it's like,
yeah. Okay. So how do I know now? Yeah.
What do I do?
Yeah.
We've been renting a townhouse for our marriage. My husband actually got it after his divorce. He needed, something he could get into quickly, easily. It was close to his work. It was great. And then you don't have to worry about cleaning out the gutters or replacing the microwave when it breaks or whatever. So it worked. And then I just moved in there after we got married. And we talked maybe a couple of times about what we would want our future home to be like. But I remember one time we made a list of things that we would want in a house or an area we were around. And it was near bike trails and at least 2 stories and I don't know, a big yard.
Sure. Yeah. Like the dream list. Yeah.
But we never took any action that direction. Okay. And I'm not entirely sure why, but I think at some level we just we didn't want to commit ourselves to that area necessarily, or something must not have felt right.
Yeah.
To not yes, let's do this. Let's take steps. Let's stop spending money on rent and put it toward a mortgage. And then that's a whole thing too. And my husband's job kind of got to be volatile. So he got an ulcer just thinking about getting a house loan. Yeah. So, and like I said, so we were in a townhouse, we were kind of getting itchy, just in general, I think. And, I remember the conversation starting with the carpet in the townhouse, because it was it was pretty old. It was pretty run down. It was a really low thread count.
Sure.
And I think we brought up asking that the landlord to change out the carpet for us. And that turned into actually doing a little bit of acreage shopping, house shopping, kind of wanting to we needed to spread our wings a little bit. We were very used to this cramped environment. And so it's what if we shop for acreages?
Yeah.
And because we were kind of craving that space. And then nothing was reasonable.
Sure.
or right. Or we would have to do major overhaul. And then just being outside of town would have been a whole thing. And then again, the ulcer of the loan of the payment was
committing to this thing.
And then I remember I started following this family on Instagram who had, and it was from the same state, also from Iowa, and they'd just a few years prior sold their house, packed up their 3 kids.
Yeah. Those are the people I'm talking about. I'm how in the world? Yeah.
And must homeschool and do all that.
Yeah.
and hit the road in a 40-foot long RV. And I'm what?
Yeah.
Because I had
that's a
zero.
Yeah.
Zero, I tent camped since I was a kid, so I'm familiar with tent camping. I know what camping is, but RVs and campers, I'd never even stepped foot in one. It was so unfamiliar, but I saw this and I was just travel, because I was itching to travel too, because I've been I can take my job anywhere, and maybe that looks okay, if Randy needs to stay here for his job, I'll just go every month or 2 and I'll pick a different place and I'll book an Airbnb for a week, and I'll work out of Tucson for a week, I'll work out of Boston for a week, and I'll see the world that way. I don't know how long I could have sustained that financially,
right. And how did he feel about that? You just taken off for a week every month, and because it sounds like he had a little bit of the itch too. So was it an option for him to be I guess I'll stay while you go and do this thing that, sounds great to me too?
Yeah, I need to ask him for his side of the story. How
that landed.
He felt.
Yeah. But it does speak to, like, it sounds like you both had this like itch to grow, almost, is what, I don't, for those of you not watching, we're both kind of making these like big, movements with our arms, like things are growing and spreading and all of that. And it sounds like you both had that a little bit. So part of what you were doing was like, how do we get that? Like, let's look at land. Well, that doesn't feel right. Well, let's look at this. Well, that doesn't feel right. So it all kind of comes back to that like gut instinct, almost, of we feel this thing we want to do, but we're not sure, how to do it. And
right.
Eventually, I guess, you landed on an RV.
So I was like, we were in the kitchen one day and I'm like, hey, so I started following this couple.
Here's what they did. Yeah.
What would you think about traveling the country in a camper?
Yeah.
And I don't think it took him that long to be like, you know what? Let's do it.
Yeah. Which is amazing. Yeah.
And I think part of that is, so he's a couple decades older than me, and a few years ago, or I'll say a couple years before this decision was made, that's easier timeline, he'd had a really bad chiropractor experience that actually like gave him
yikes.
Sciatica, like a crippled leg, basically. Oof. For a year.
Yeah.
And during that year, he's like, is this the way I am now? Am I just not going to be able to ride my bike or work on my stuff or do what I want to do or work out or like go hiking? Am I not going to be like the husband that I promised I was going to be able to be because of this thing? So that really, I think, gave him like a time is precious. Yeah. Like, don't wait until you're 75 to start living your life.
Yeah.
So he, because his job was localized, he couldn't take it on the road. He just retired early.
Okay.
And, said, Holly, you're the breadwinner now.
Thank goodness you can take yours on the road. Yeah.
And we looked at, what we had in our Edward Jones and planning and, the different tables of like when to possibly start withdrawing, the pros and cons of withdrawing Social Security early versus waiting and all that stuff and mapping everything out. And we started researching. So, it wasn't hey, yeah, let's do this. And tomorrow we buy the thing and tomorrow we move out and then we're on the road. Like, this did not happen in a week.
Yeah. And that, again, that's part of your story that intrigued me was, I think, again, social media is a little bit of, a mind F in this way, in that we see, this couple, they packed up their 3 kids, they hit the road, they're living but what we don't see is the year and a half, 2 years of planning and preparation and all of that stuff before. So you don't need to talk to us about all of that, but I am curious, like, you have this idea, it's exciting in the beginning, but I would imagine it wasn't exciting the whole way through. So how do you kind of sustain, or how did you even know the difference between, we looked at land and that didn't feel right, and we're planning this thing, and some days I'm sure it didn't feel right. So how did you kind of know to keep going with this one and overcome? I would imagine there were some things in there that you had to overcome in order to make it happen. What kept you guys going in this direction?
I feel like ideas kind of fall into different categories, and there's different ranges. And there's like those ideas where it's just like, oh, that would be nice, or that sounds interesting, or that sounds cool, or yeah, I kind of want to write a book someday, or I kind of want to do this or whatever. And they just stay in that, oh, that would be nice idea state, which is fine. We have 1 million of those a day, right? They don't all need to come to fruition, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the ideas that it's like, oh, this really does sound interesting. Let me look into this. Like, I remember a few years ago, I got into home brewing kombucha, and I was really good at it. It was really tasty booch, and I enjoyed it. So I'm like, I was thinking I should be brewing this in bigger batches and like kegs sizes, and selling this to bars as a non-alcoholic, but a little alcoholic option, like to bars, especially as I went like non-alcoholic a few years ago. So that really spoke to me to
Yeah.
be able to have this. Anyway, I don't need to go down the Booch story, but I really had this idea, and I was pretty interested in it. So then we researched like what it takes to do this commercially, and we even like bought a couple of tools, like how you measure how much sugar, and like we spent some time on this.
You went down started down the road of it. Yeah.
Started down the road. And then it was like, you know what, there's a lot, the FDA gets involved and with the food and doing stuff in your house and all this stuff. And I was like, you know what? And I had my branding business at that point too. So I was like, you know what? I'm not passionate enough about this to overcome the obstacles.
Yeah. Yeah.
In order to like do this, I'm going to focus on my branding business and homebrew, and like, that's fine. It was a nice thought experiment, but never mind. After the research was done, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So then there's those, or other things where maybe you start down a path and life takes over and it just ends up not being a priority, and then you put it on the shelf or whatever. So so there's that kind of category, and then I feel like there's the burn the ships ideas where you are so committed to doing this that there is no option of retreat, which is what this was for us. Even though, so at every point, we're doing the research. We're like, what manufacturer of what style, what floor plan, and what setup. We had this big whiteboard at the townhouse, which was really fun to draw all of our ideas and possibilities out. And it's like, do we want a Class C? Do we want this? Do we want a VIN? And just pros and cons of everything, and what we wanted to be able to do and bring with us. And at no point during research phase was it, oh, never mind, I don't, like, there was no second guessing.
Yeah. So the research is still sort of exciting, and you're essentially you're dreaming, even though you're researching, you're sort of dreaming on the whiteboard and narrowing down, what do we want? How do we want to do it? So yeah, I would imagine that part of it is fun. And I think a lot of people start that part, like your kombucha thing. I think a lot of people start down the road of, this is a thing I think I want to pursue. And either they have the realistic thing you had, which is like, yeah, actually, I don't want to pursue this as much as it's going to take from me. Or they get to a certain point where it gets hard, and then it's like, well, this is impossible. And I guess, so, when it got hard for you guys, I would imagine there was time. Your husband had to retire. You had to get out of a house. You had, like, what kept you in the fight, if you will?
Yeah, it was, and we were behind. So like, I had this timeline in my head. I was saying Q2 22, quarter two of, by the end of quarter two of 2022.
Like a true branding person.
I was going to make t-shirts, right?
Yeah, you had a brand.
But then, it turns out, we were a little optimistic, maybe a little naive as far as how long it takes to do things that we've never done before. So like, we're just like, yes, we'll be done. Because we didn't just buy a camper and a truck and go. We had to totally renovate and outfit for how we wanted to camp. And we had to install a bunch of things and change things because we bought a used camper. So we totally made it our own, added solar, a battery, like a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So that took months, and we really we weren't able to get started until after the Iowa winter. There was no working on it. Like there was no painting the walls in December when it's negative 30 outside. Right. So that kind of put us back.
Yeah. I would imagine.
And then like my husband, Randy, would make our to-do list for the day.
Okay.
And at this point, probably we had to move out of our house, which was a thing, which was then a balance of, what do we want to sell?
Sure.
And add to the kitty that way, the travel kitty. And what do we want to store long term? Not like it's not important enough to bring with us, but we want to store it.
But we don't want to get rid of it
some future
completely.
life. Yeah, exactly. And then what are we just like donating, purging, tossing? So like that's a whole thing. Downsizing and moving. Preparing the camper. Preparing the truck, there was a lot. Randy took out the back seats and built custom stuff. Like it was a whole.
Sure.
We had a lot of custom build stuff involved that we were mostly doing ourselves.
Okay.
which is not what I preach to my clients. I'm like, don't DIY. we were doing all this stuff ourselves.
And you're not really moving into a place, because if you weren't ready to leave yet, you're moving out of a place and you don't really have a place to move into. So yeah, was that a last minute type thing? Or
I kept asking Randy, because we were doing all this stuff, downsizing and moving and packing and selling. And I'm like, how do other people move? Like, it doesn't take other people this much to move. And he said, they rent a truck. Yeah. It shows up. They throw all their crap in it. It goes to their new house and they take all the crap out. I'm like, oh, that's very different than what we're doing.
Yeah, sometimes maybe there's a stop at storage in the middle, but it's pretty much one truck from way A to B. Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's very different. Yeah. So yeah, we had all these things going on, and it's a date we had to be out of the house. Yeah. And we also moved storage units. So our storage units aren't like, let's just jam them full of stuff so we can only access like the 2% that's in front of the door. They're very organized with shelves. So when we stop back in Iowa and we need to do something, swap grab out something, or whatever, change something, we can walk in, we can get our, we know where stuff is. So we wanted to be very organized, which takes time.
Yeah.
And then we're, renovating this camper. And so we're out of the house and the camper's not ready yet. So we're sleeping in a tent for a month. And every day Randy has these lists of what he thinks is a reasonable number of tasks to accomplish that day. And then like
you get two
maybe one of them would get done because things would add themselves to the list.
Sure.
That word and then they would jump to the top. So then it's like, what did I do today?
Yeah.
I went to the store to buy cables and then I had to go back to the store when they sold me the wrong ones. And
and that took 4 hours. Yeah.
So it was hard from the amount of stuff that we had to do that was on our list to go and do it. But at no point was it would have been more painful to say, never mind, let's just undo this whole thing and go back to a house. It would have been more painful to stay. And
was that, do you think that was because you had a feeling of, we've just come too far? Or was it what you were heading toward was that appealing that it was worth all of this? Was that,
the second?
Yeah. Because I feel like when I work with people, I feel like the biggest thing that gets in the way of everybody and everything is our expectations. Like, what are your expectations? And sometimes people haven't set them. They have this, or they haven't really tuned into what they are. Like you started this by describing, like, we had this itch. And I think that happens to a lot of people. We haven't, personally, 100%, when you first told me that, I was like, oh, I have never related to something more in my life where, every few years I'm like, I'm ready to blow the whole thing up and start something new and be something different. And I have learned over the years, like, I have to investigate, well, what is it that I'm actually wanting here? It's not just change, like what for change's sake, it's whatever else. And so I find with people, they either they feel that and then they jump, or they feel that and then they go with something that they think is going to give them who knows what, happiness, joy, whatever. And they don't really define that for themselves. So had you guys had those conversations about, like, not only what, like, logistically what our life's going to look like, but what do we want out of this? Were those conversations, or was it just something you kind of knew, or what was that all about?
Totally. Yeah. So I'll jump to, just a side note on your point about people like making change for the sake of change. Like, I think we are, or we know those people who have to move houses every so many years, or they need to get a different car every so many years, or just rearrange their living room. And I was talking to a shamanic woman at some point after I'd made this leap, and she's like, everybody has a rate of change. For some people it's like shorter, maybe it's 1 or 2 years, and for some people they can go 12 years without a big change, but everybody has kind of this point at which, this interval where they need to make these changes in their lives. I haven't done any scientific research on that, but do with that what you will. So the expectations.
Yes.
So many years ago, I gave up expectations. I was like, expectations suck. Because they often lead to disappointment, whether it's, oh man, I watched this trailer for this movie and I'm so excited to go see it, or I heard such great things about it. And then your bar is up here. You're like, it has to be up here or above for me to walk out of there happy or that I've satisfied. Right. So then if it doesn't meet that, or it's like, oh man, they didn't include the funny parts that I saw or whatever.
Yeah. Or all the funny parts were in the trailer.
or I found myself, I would be driving to an event or something and hoping or expecting certain people to be there.
Yes.
Or something like that. And then I was like, and since it was like a bit of a drive, I could like kind of, I don't get to do this anymore. I used to drive and just like think.
Yeah.
I do it in other ways.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, Holly, what if, decide how this night is going to be no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not dependent on somebody else's actions or choices.
Yeah.
And so I started really applying that. Don't expect, even sometimes of yourself, don't put yourself up to certain expectations. Really just be open.
Yeah.
To what comes. And then you get to, instead of like expecting Randy to fill up my water bottle for me because he should do these types of things, he just does it. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the sweetest thing ever. Instead of being mad because something didn't happen that I expected it to. So,
yeah.
I just
and I think
expectations.
And I think that goes to what I talk about a lot with people, which is be clear on them. So you're right. Like, I don't think you should give them up, but I think be clear on not only what your expectations are, but why. So you're going to that event. If your expectation is that somebody else is going to be there, well, why? What are you going for? What's the point? Is it just to see that person? Because why can't you just have coffee with them or something else? But if it's because you think that person's going to lead to X, Y, and Z, well, then how do you create the night so that you just get to X, Y, and Z and you don't need that other person? So just being really clear on what your expectations are and why you're doing the thing you're doing can be really helpful. And again, I think it doesn't always come into play with these kinds of decisions. Sometimes it's, I felt this way, and I think if I do this thing, either I'm going to stop feeling this way, or I'm going to feel a different way. I'm going to be happier or more fulfilled or calmer or whatever. I know personally, when I get that itch, a lot of times now, what I've realized over the years is it's like I need a decluttering. Like you said, people who change their living room furniture. I always find I get it if we've traveled like if we've traveled frequently and I'm finding myself like really hating the house when I get back, it's usually because I'm craving the simplicity of either the house or the apartment or the hotel that we were in. And I'm like, oh, this is a sign that I need to declutter my life right now. Like I'm feeling overwhelmed by the stuff, either physical or emotional. And I'm wanting to live forever in that hotel room because there was, soap and towels and that's it. But it's taken me a long time to get there. I used to just think like, I need to change. I need to move. I'm unhappy. I need to be happier. And so being really clear, not only on what your expectations are, but why you have them, I think can be really important in that.
That's perfect. You just perfectly laid out the recipe for getting curious and getting
yeah.
So perfect. So at one point I do remember Randy asking me, and we were already like months into this preparation phase when he asked me, what I was hoping for on the other side, what I wanted to get out. I don't remember how he phrased it exactly, but why are we doing this? What do I want to get out of it?
What is this for?
And I thought about it and I didn't, because I'm not expecting my life to be perfect on the other side.
Right.
I don't expect anything like that. And I wasn't and we don't have any goals of like, I want to hit every single national park. Or like, it was just, my answer to him was, I just want a wildly different lifestyle.
Yeah.
I just want to do something completely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Success.
What you got? Yeah. What you got? But that's kind of perfect because you're right. No matter what happens then, expectation met. Like if it's sunny every day, if it's raining every day, if you get stuck in, I don't know where, somewhere for Ohio for 3 months because something happens, like whatever, it's wildly different.
And even so in those like weeks when we were out of the house and we had no choice, but well, I wouldn't say no choice. Our choice was to then sleep in a tent for a month, basically. Randy said, like, well, this wasn't the way that we anticipated our adventure starting, but it's definitely started.
Yeah.
Like,
for sure.
This is it. We're on the adventure now.
Yes. If we need a date for the beginning, this is it.
That would be July 1st.
Yeah.
Out of our house, not into the RV yet, and in this like weird homeless place.
Yeah. Living in a tent. Yeah.
At least we were in a park. We weren't like sleeping under a bridge. We were in a park.
Exactly. And again, choice. It was your choice. That was the big, that's the big differentiator.
I mean, yeah, we could have shelled out money for a month on a hotel or something, but we're work with what we have, people. And we had a tent and the park had showers and we were gone all day working on the RV. So we just came back at night and showered and slept in the tent and got up in the morning and went to the storage and So you kept yourself busy enough. And now, were you working through this whole thing? Because I'm wondering, like, how did you balance your life? Because I'm guessing he had retired at this point, or no? Was he still trying to go in? Okay. No, he was done, and I just kind of ended up on a little unspoken hiatus.
Okay.
I don't even remember.
Like projects were done. I wasn't doing anything else.
I don't know. I wasn't actively searching for more work. So I just kind of like turtled. I was like, nobody heard from me for a while. Right. But if anybody sent me an email or wanted something, of course I took care of it. But nothing was active on my part. It was all focused on the transition. Yeah. And then were you able to kind of jump back in fairly quickly once you got on the road? Yeah. Yes. I mean, I didn't. The motivation was not quite there yet.
Sure. Yeah.
It took a lot. Yes, I did get back into work kind of slowly and more active as things went. But it took a surprising amount of time for us to kind of decompress after all those months of go, do.
Yeah.
I think I sent a friend an email maybe after the first few months on the road, which would have been like the end of 2022. I'd have to go back and see, but let's say that's when
somewhere
I sent
in there. Yeah.
And I was like kind of because I'm like, oh, I've done yoga maybe a total of 3 times, and I haven't gotten out my piano that I intentionally brought so that I would play it, and I haven't touched my watercolor paint, and I haven't done, I was thinking of all these things that I wanted to do because I had this. Okay,
there's your expectations.
I talked about not having expectations, but I'd say the one that snuck in was I had this idea that the nature of not having a house, just by that nature, somehow I would have all of this extra free time, which doesn't logically make sense because we didn't even have to do really upkeep with our house. So it's not like, oh, I spend this time gardening or yard working or cleaning out gutters now.
Right.
And when I don't have to do that, I'll be able to do other stuff. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
In my life. So I don't know where all this new time was going to come from. But somehow I thought that it would be there and that I'd just be mountain biking all the time and I'd just be outside all the time and doing this and super active and super fit and like all this stuff would magically happen. Well, it didn't.
Yeah, you're the same. What do they say? Like you take your stuff with you. Even when you move, it comes with you. So yeah.
But part of that was at first. So, of course, the friend that I sent this email to, like disappointed in how I'd been spending my time, is she was a therapist. So, of course, she gave me a very thoughtful response about how maybe I just needed that time. Maybe I needed to spend my nights watching TV or doing whatever.
Resting. Yeah.
Just because I'm still coming down.
Yeah.
It's just taken a lot to come down off of that go. And I do, when we first really got on the road, like really, we were spending time in the Black Hills, like at our first like real boondocking spot, first camping. I'd never been a person to just like sit outside and just like look at what, I mean, there was nothing to look at where we were. So I've never been like that person, but I just really I would just get out our chair and I would just sit outside and I would just like look at these hills and
soak it all in.
Yeah. I would just sit there and I was like, I've now become this person, but that was what I needed to do at that time as part of the transition.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good way of saying it too. Because I was just thinking as you were talking, like, okay, let's talk about this, because this is that unmet expectation piece of like, I had an idea in my head of what it was going to look like, and it's not looking like that right now. And so, you know, I'm not feeling good about it, but it sounds like you were able to, I don't know, either one, realize, well, just because it doesn't look like that right now doesn't mean it's never going to look like that. Because I think that's what people do. They are like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And then step back and recognize I'm in a transition place. And this transition place requires some rest and some resetting and, you know, staring at the greenery or wherever you were at the time. And that's temporary. It's okay. Like I'll probably get to the place where I want, or if not, I'm going to get whatever I want out of it. So yeah, talk through that a little bit. Like, was it like that? Or was it just your friend told you to rest and you did?
No, it was her shining that light, which, I wish I'd known 4 months prior.
Yeah.
So then I wouldn't have all these like resentful and whatever and frustrated feelings come up. Like, I'm not the person that I thought I was going to be. And her just telling me like, you're still in transition. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
But then with that realization, I was like, okay, so 2023, new year kind of helps with the whole like mental, who do I want to be thing. So I'm like, okay, if at the end of 2023, I want to say I'm a person, like you have to embody the things that you want to do. So I was like, if I want to be a person who practices yoga, who plays piano, who watercolors, who does these activities, mountain bikes and does all the things, I need to start like now. Like I need to put these into my weekly life now. So now like on my pen and paper planner, I have a personal to-do list and a professional to-do list. Perfect. And on the personal side, it's always like yoga, watercolor, do something fun, you know, explore this, do that, whatever. And I have that list to keep me in check. Making sure that those things don't go by the wayside, because they won't happen on their own. I think that was the thing. I thought I thought the yoga mat was going to get itself out.
Yes.
I thought these things would just happen on their own.
Yeah. Well,
that I wouldn't have to be as intentional about them. But you do. Like no matter where you live or how you live, you have to be super intentional with your time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just goes out the window. And that's not to say I don't watch TV at night. I still do. I really like that as a way to like wind down. But it's always done with the choice. Like, is this a TV night or are we doing something else?
Or am I going somewhere else? Yeah.
Right. And just kind of like saying yes to adventure, right? Is this the night we just like go outside and sit under the stars for a while?
Yeah.
Or are the bugs out and screw that? Let's go inside.
TV sounds like a better option. Yeah. I think there's, you know, again, you said all the sort of right words in there, which is, I thought it was going to be this way. I thought it was just going to happen instead of me doing it. And I also love that you make the two lists because the personal stuff is a priority. Do you then, I have like a kind of a follow-up on that. Do you then make sure in your plan for the week, there's time or space for all of that? Or is it just like these to-do lists that are reminders for you to get it at some point?
I'm not, my preference is not to schedule things very rigidly. So, it's not like Wednesday at 9, no matter what, this is time to do this or that or whatever. So, whenever I'm like in a state of, oh, what should I do?
Yeah,
I kind of go to those lists and it's like, okay, should it be something on this list or should it be this? And then what will it be? I'm also part of an online yoga studio, which is really fun.
Yeah.
On the road. And the instructor had this question around Christmas. They do this event called Restmas, which I just love. Because that's another season where we're all like, go, 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 and do, and attend, and family, and food, and all the things. So they focus on Restmas, which I was really jiving with.
Yeah. Is it at the same time, or do they do it following that other time?
It's the month of December.
Amazing. I love this place. I want to know where it is.
I'm like, oh, yes, please. Yeah. But she posed the question, like, instead of, asking, what do you need to do? Or, I don't know, instead of whatever question you're going to ask yourself to force yourself to do something. Ask what would feel nourishing right now.
Yeah.
And then you pick the answer and then you don't feel guilty about it.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Because you're answering that specific question. Yeah.
What would feel nourishing right now?
Yeah.
Have the answer, go do that thing and do it guilt-free.
And I find sometimes people are surprised that it's not always from the personal list. Like sometimes if people do that for themselves, they're like, oh, it would actually feel really great if I got this task done. So let me do it. I've been putting it off for weeks, but it would actually feel really good if it was done. So let me get to it. Yeah. People are often surprised when they pick themselves that it isn't always, a spa pedicure or something. Sometimes it's just, let me get this thing done that's been on my to-do list that I've been avoiding. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. What would feel nourishing? That's so great. So, I could do this all day, as you know, but I want to be respectful of your time and sort of wrap it up a little bit. So we've talked a little about how did you get here? How did you stick with it? How did you sort of have the power and the courage to pivot when you needed to? And how did you stay? And then I have expectations written on my little list and we got right to it without even me asking. But what else would you want people to know? Not necessarily about what you're doing lifestyle wise, but like about making these big changes and about sort of following your gut and going forward with it. What else? What haven't we said?
Yeah, I was thinking, as you were talking about, that things felt right? You kept going down this path. Things continued to feel right. Even though it was hard, it was still like the right kind of hard. It was a necessary hard. If we'd gotten, say, and then the transition phase, right? Where no one should make any like snap decisions, like in the first 4 months after you make a big change, for sure. Like you're still transitioning people
for sure.
Like fourth trimester or something. Yeah. But if we'd been on the road, say a year or something, and we're not victims of sunk cost fallacy.
Sure.
Especially. So it's like, even though we've made all this investment and spent all this time, like if we've been on the road for some period of time and decided, you know what, this actually really doesn't feel right. I think we should do something else. I know we would have been able to do that.
Yeah.
But everything is amazing.
It's feeling great. Yeah. It's feeling great. Yeah. Do you guys have a time? Like, are you just going to do this till it stops feeling good? Or did you have we're going to do it for 3 years?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's awesome. It's as long as it feels right.
Yeah. And giving yourself the space to, when it stops, you now both know, like, it's not a decision you just end. Like you got to find a place to go. You got to find, So tuning into that when it starts to feel bad and not finding yourselves like, we got to stop immediately, kind of.
Right. Yeah. There would be another research phase.
And hopefully
and
no more tense
phase. Well, I could do it for a month.
Right. I guess that's true. For longer than a month. That's so great. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to follow your adventures. And to that end, where can people find you? I know, I can speak to professionally why they should come find you, but I don't know if you guys you're not doing anything on a personal level, are you, for your travels and stuff? Like, can people follow that or no?
We had, like, as you spoke to earlier, there's YouTube and Instagram and all the things are full of hashtag camper life.
Yes, they are.
And And a lot of those people, like they're making a living that way, right?
Yeah,
So they're making
yeah.
videos and they're posting weekly and they have a list and they're trying to get, money from ads and all the things. And that was never like, I'm like,
intention.
no, I have a career.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm not going to spend an extra 30 hours a week, like, editing video and doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
But we'd said for a while, like, oh, we should keep a blog for our friends and family who want to stay in the know. And then we just kept not, because
it didn't feel right.
Other things.
We were
doing other things. And then I finally did start one. And then I got like 4 blog posts up before, my paying work got busy, and then that like totally went by the wayside. So so if you want to say hi or send me a note, my official website is fancyfoxdesign.com.
Perfect.
And I have contact info at the bottom there. Yeah. Feel free to.
Yeah. And I think, look, the fancyfoxdesign.com is the business, but after listening to this and how meticulous you were with the research and and also how creative you guys have been with solutions and all of that, if anybody needs professional branding and that, I don't know why they wouldn't want to check you out. So I know we didn't talk about professional stuff, but it really, I think who you are and how you guys went about this speaks to the creativity and the, diligence that you apply to your work too. So
thank you.
We'll check you out there. So thank you for joining us and sharing part of your story so we can all sort of do better at making these kind of gut decisions and listening and tuning into what we really want and how we can get there. So thank you, Holly.
Yes, I really love your recipe of digging into every why behind and then, okay, if not this, then how.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so great.
Thanks. Well, thanks.